I've learned 3 things now that I'm into my 4th video. 1, that I need faster uploading speeds for my internet. Videos take a long time to upload, I've found. 2, I say like a lot. It's everywhere, and I'm tired of editing them out, which makes editing take a really long time. So I'm gonna work really hard on never saying like ever again. And 3, y'all are amazing. I am almost at double-digit subscribers, and I am so excited. It might as well be like 1 million, because I am so excited anybody wants to see even a little bit of what I have to say. So thank you all for coming back, and thank you for anyone who's just found me, who wants to listen. Without further ado, let's finish up this mid-year wrap-up. Welcome back to my channel, everyone. In this video, we're gonna finish up my 2020 wrap-up of what I read in the first half of the year, starting from May 15th and going to about June 30th. I had to do a lot of distance learning with my kids, so there was a whole lot of filming lessons and hosting Google Meets and grading. So much work, which didn't seem like a lot when it was just some papers on my desk, but somehow when it's in a Google Drive, it seems like it's never ending. So reading was really important for me during this time. I needed the escape. I needed something that was not child related, and I needed something that was going to spark some joy in my life. And boy, did I pick some really good books. My picker was like on fire during this time. I cannot wait to share these books. This is the video I've been most excited about filming for everybody. So let's get started with the audiobooks that I listened to first. I didn't read a lot of audiobooks like I thought I would, because it was really difficult for me to pay attention to social distancing and not getting hit by random cars and listen to an audiobook and pay attention. So I only listened to 2 this time. The first one was recommended by Books with Emily Fox, and it's called The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I cannot sing this book's praises enough, and I'm kind of like, where have you been all my life? Emily suggests this book on her channel with the tagline, it's like, what if Firefly and Hitchhiker's Guide had a baby? And that would be this book. And she had me at Hitchhiker's Guide. Hitchhikers and all of its subsequent follow-up books are my favorite books of all time. I reread them every single summer. So I was super in. I wasn't a huge Firefly fan, but I really understood why fans liked it. So I got it on Libby and started listening. And first of all, the narrator was fabulous. She was great. I love how the author really drags you into the story by using a character that's also joining the ship. And I love this way of narrating, because it means that as you're introduced to characters, there's no forced conversations. The conversation of introduction seem really natural and easy to read through. You also find out that Rosemary, the character who's joining the crew, has her own shady past and history that you really want to find out about, because you're finding out all these other people's backgrounds and connections and relationships, and you just want to learn more about the character that kind of steps in for you. I also like how the author steps back from using Rosemary as the only means of you learning about things after a while, because it's like you're now part of the crew as well. That was wonderful. I felt like home from go with every single one of the characters. The dialogue throughout the book is very much like Hitchhikers in that it is witty and it's clever and it's easy. It really reads like these characters have been together for a really long time, that they clearly know each other, they care about each other genuinely. And sometimes that can seem forced in some books, but in this one, it really reads like they're a found family, and that's just who they are. Loved it. Let's talk about diversity. I love science fiction, but I'm not usually a modern science fiction reader. I love Star Trek. Almost every single iteration of it is amazing, and I love them all, but I do kind of hate their forehead of the week scenario, because it's a lot of money to come up with a non-humanoid shaped alien to deal with for whatever that episode calls for. This book does not pull the let's find another humanoid alien to deal with. The author has created an amazing array of intergalactic species that have to interact in some way because of commerce and just genuine protection or just casual interaction. I love that every species has its own unique language and backstory and culture and family structure and social expectation. I love how fleshed out this world is. You can get lost in this world. I am so thrilled that there are more than one book in this series, because I cannot wait to dive into the next one to find out what else happens in this universe that Becky Chambers has created. Also, wonderful representation of LGBTQ plus families for the humanoids. You've got polyamorous people. It raises a lot of questions that if you love the movie Her, Joaquin Phoenix's movie from maybe 6 or 7 years ago. If you haven't watched it, please do. It's beautiful, bare minimum. But if you loved that movie and the premise of that movie, you will love some plot lines in this book because it asks some really interesting questions like, is a robot alive? When does AI become an actual being of its own right? And I love that exploration. And it was in such a natural way that it made sense, not only for the characters to have the conversation, but the AIs to have the conversation. I love how they explore different ways of characters being able to form relationships with each other in ways that were not considered heteronormativity. I absolutely adored this. It was a lengthy book, which was kind of fun because you really don't want to leave these characters. They feel like home. Usually I have to be doing something else if I'm listening to an audiobook like driving. I often found myself not doing anything, stopping what my activity was just so I can listen to the story. It was so compelling. The second audiobook I listened to it's interesting. It's called The Hike by Drew Magary. How to describe this book? Okay, so I need to start off by saying I really loved this book, but I honestly don't know why. This is a book that is going to stick with me for a really long time. I think about this book often, and I think I'm always going to think about this book often, and that rarely happens. And for those of you who have had that one book just kind of stick in your craw a bit, not in a bad way, it's just there and you're always thinking about it. This is that book for me. Non-spoiler summary of this book. A man goes on a business trip and he's staying at a little hotel in a small town. He has some time to kill before he goes to a business dinner, which is the whole point of the trip. He calls his family and says, yeah, I got here, everything's fine, I'm gonna go for a hike. So he goes out in the woods behind this motel and he follows a path and he goes on a hike. And eventually the book ends. And that's the best I can do with no spoilers. It was only 7 discs, so it's not a super long book. But I honestly can't tell you what in the world I just listened to. But I was compelled to listen to every second of it. I have never wanted to recommend a book so much and yet feel like I can't say anything about it at all. This is very much a story that you have to suspend every ounce of disbelief you possibly have. Like all of it. Get rid of all of it. Get rid of things having to make sense. Get rid of plausibility. Get rid of all of that. Get rid of linear storytelling. Get rid of that as well. If you've ever played D&D, like Dungeons and Dragons, you might get some of this. If you've played a lot of video games, and not video games now, I mean like video games from like the 80s, where it was very linear in the beating of a game, where you have to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 in order to beat the game. None of this open world stuff that we have now, which is cool, but you have to go through the levels in order. That's kind of how this book is. And I don't even think that's a good way of describing it, but that's kind of honestly the best I can do. The narrator for this was great. I really enjoyed the narrator. I feel like I need to own this book though, because I'd love to also read it on my own. You have to, again, suspend all disbelief and just enjoy the ride. It is a ride. There was a time where I wasn't sure I actually liked the book. And about halfway through, I'm like, why am I listening to this? What even is this? What is happening right now? And I'd be sitting in the car, like at Starbucks or something, waiting in line, because you know how the lines are now. And just listening, going like, what is even happening? I'm sitting there with my hands on the steering wheel like this the whole time, because I have no idea what's going on. But I felt compelled to keep going. The main character, his plight is bizarre. You really feel for him as a character, and you really need to know what happens to him. Like, you need to know. At the very end of the book, the conclusion starts to happen. And I gotta say, as soon as the conclusion starts to happen, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, first of all, I guess they're wrapping up. I have no idea how this is gonna go. I couldn't predict any of it, but it was such an interesting ride. And the last little bit of it, I was stopped at a red light and the actual finish of the book is happening, that the last scene or two. And I was so floored, which I haven't been this surprised during a book in a long time. I was so floored by the ending of this book that I literally, when I was listening to it, sat like this in my car, like the Home Alone pose, and had to be honked into moving my car because the light had turned green. But I was still so shocked about what had happened at the end of this book that the guy behind me was just annoyed at my shockedness, I guess. I implore you, pick up this book. Get it on audio. If you want to just have something to listen to. You're going to need to pay attention though. Like, I can't stress that enough because things change so much as you go through. I don't think you can zone out during this book. But if you have read this book, I would love to hear about it down in the comments. This is a conversation I want to have because I've never heard of anybody else who's read this book. I would love to know what you think. And if you haven't read it, pick it up. I have literally no idea if you're going to like it. I don't know what kind of person would like it beside the actual author. I'm kind of surprised that I liked it. Okay, so after those fun rides, let's talk about the actual physical copies that I read during this time. I kept the crazy, weird vibes going with a book I actually picked up 2 years ago on Independent Bookstore Day, but just I needed the right time to want to pick it up. Some of you may know, like, you get that book and you're like, I want to read this, but can I read it now? I don't know. I need to be in the right headspace. This was the time for this book. And it was called Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. And first of all, this cover. Let's talk about this cover. I ordinarily do not buy hardback. I'm just not a fan. They're kind of a pain to hold. I hate dust jackets. They're heavy and they take up space on my shelf. But I had to get this cover. Here's the back because all of it is just a beautiful masterpiece. This book lights up under a black light. I was originally attracted to this cover, not only because it's gorgeous, but also because I'm a sucker for all things octopus and cephalopod. And so the second I saw tentacles, I was like, I need to see what this book is. And then Meddling Kids. First thing that comes to mind. I'll wait while you think about it. If you said Scooby-Doo, you are right. This is a pseudo retelling of a story, like a mystery, that Scooby-Doo and Friends would have maybe taken on. It's not Scooby-Doo and Friends, so it's not the Mystery Machine Gang, but it is about a group of kids who solved basic crimes in their neighborhood up by this lake when they were kids. And this takes place many years later when they're adults and what happens when they need to revisit a case. And so the premise already is kind of fascinating because as a kid, I absolutely adored all of the Scooby-Doo iterations, even when the Harlem Globetrotters came in, maybe more when the Harlem Globetrotters came in. I absolutely loved the unmasking. When they finally had the We Will Have a Real Monster cartoon, I was very excited about it. I've seen every single one of the live actions. I'm also extremely excited that our girl Velma, it's canon now that she is a lesbian. Congrats on coming out, Velma. You've been trying to tell us for years. I am a huge fan. The characters are definitely an homage to the Scooby-Doo gang. There's even a dog, very adorable dog, that is in this as well. This story is definitely for people who A, loved Scooby-Doo, B, loves solving mysteries, and C, is a huge fan of Call of Cthulhu. If you have ever read anything by Lovecraft, although we hate Lovecraft, spoiler alert, he's a terrible person. But the worlds that he has created and the games, the role-playing games that have been inspired by the worlds he's created, those are incredibly rich and fascinating. If you're a horror fan, for instance, or if you just like subtle suspense, this is a great book for you. You've got great characters. There's some slapsticky nonsense, just like in the cartoon for Scooby-Doo. But there's also at heart like some serious, deep mysteries. And they're going to keep you guessing. There are red herrings like crazy, just like in the show. There are some weird twists and turns with characterization. You are always wondering about whether any of these people are reliable narrators. It reads pretty fast. I couldn't put it down. I think I got through it in about 2 days, maybe about 6.5 8 hours, something like that. I'm really hoping for a sequel. I highly recommend this book, Meddling Kids. It's fantastic. The next book that I picked up was In the Labyrinth of Drakes, a memoir of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. This is the 4th of 5 books in the Lady Trent series. When I saw the first book, The Natural History of Dragons by the same author and same illustrator for the front cover. And I just absolutely loved the illustrations. I've played D&D since 2nd edition, and I love the monster manuals. They're probably my favorite. I just love all the different creatures that get created in a world. Really in-depth world creation is a huge plus in my book, whether it is a role-playing game, a video game, a movie, a TV show, or a book. And so as soon as I saw, ooh, they're serious about the natural history part, it's fantastic. The whole world takes place in an alternate steampunky reality where it's kind of our world, but not really our world. But some things are kind of familiar. Lady Trent comes from a country that is reminiscent of England, but is definitely not called England. There are places that are more like the Middle East, but not called the Middle East. They've got different religions that are sometimes reminiscent of our major religions on planet Earth, but they're not quite the same. And of course, dragons exist. You follow Lady Trent. In the beginning of the series, she is an aspiring dragon natural historian, and she wants to study dragons, which in this world, just like ours, it was very much frowned upon for ladies to be taking on such a dangerous outside job when they should be in the home and being cute. And she was not having any of that. In each of the books that follow, you're seeing her on a different journey through her career. Each one is like a separate memoir, so you're not reading them completely linearly through her life. She's definitely leaving out chunks in between each of the books. So time continues to pass, and she's only retelling the parts that are really important to her overall life story or her overall professional story. So they are individual. You can read them out of order. I wouldn't recommend it. What I love about Marie Brennan is that even though we're in book 4, she does not spend a lot of time rehashing things that have happened before. It will come up naturally in conversation amongst the characters, or when the Lady Trent is talking to you as the reader of this memoir, she'll mention something, but she does not go into a lot of depth of rehashing. She will just casually mention something that's happened and has been illustrated in one of the other books, and you just have to remember. I recommend starting with book 1. There is one more, and I'm waiting to pick that up because I believe it's out in soft cover now, because all my books have to match. You know how it is. But I absolutely adored this. It was a wonderful continuation. You meet some characters that have come up in previous books, which is really fun. You get to see some of the machinations of the countries starting to come to a head. In the beginning, you're talking about how countries can use dragons for their political and economic gain. And some of that's starting to happen now in this book, which is cool. There is only one more, so it'll be really interesting to see where does her career go and what happens when all of this stuff is finally like out in the open. Really fantastic read. Again, if you haven't read any of these, I highly recommend you start with the first one, which is A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was some lighter fare because I felt like everything I had read so far was either really long or really involved, and I wanted something really light and funny. I'm a huge fan of Oscar Wilde. I've read a lot of his books, not all of them, but I've read quite a few. And I've had this one on my shelf for a while, The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. This is just a short story, and so there's other stories in this particular copy, which, by the way, isn't this adorable? French flaps. Super love the French flaps. This one also had a couple of other stories. It has A Canterville Ghost, Lord Arthur Saville's Crime, and The Sphinx Without a Secret. All three are not very long, relatively engaging, and each one is very different from each other. So why they're all in the same book, I'll never know, but it's definitely more than one story. So I'll talk about each briefly. I had heard of The Canterville Ghost. I know they made a movie about it. I've never seen it. I thought it was like a serious business ghost story. If you read The Picture of Dorian Gray, that's like dark. It's dark stuff. I love it. One of my favorite books, but it's dark. This is absolutely not. I laughed out loud at parts. I thought it was so funny and witty that it could have been a modern story, like a sitcom. And the ending was so sweet. I absolutely adored this book. It's all about a family who moves in, I believe they're American. They move into an old British manor. Sound familiar from the last books I've read? It was kind of on a tear with British manors and Americans living there. They move into this British manor that the owner, the previous owner who sold it to them, tells them flat out, this manor is haunted. And they're like, okay. And the guy's like, no, really, it's haunted. Everybody for hundreds of years has been scared out of their wits. We're thrilled to be getting rid of this. Are you sure you really want this? Because it's haunted. And they're like, it's fine. And then the hauntings begin, and you meet the Canterville ghost, and it's all about the family's interactions with this ghost. It is a laugh riot. Absolutely adored it. I will not spoil it for you because seriously, the twists and turns in this are funny. It's absolutely worth a quick read. It's not that many pages. The next book, which was Sir Arthur Saville's Crime, was a very different fare. It's all about a group of people, and one person in particular, Arthur Saville, who comes to a fancy dress party, and people are having cocktails and they're milling about, and the hostess has invited someone who tells fortunes. They're a palm expert, and the expert goes around and reads everybody's palm to tell them their future. And one woman's going to be a great singer, and someone else is going to make a fortune, and they're all laughing and having a lovely time. And Arthur Saville puts his hand out and says, okay, I'd love to hear it. And the guy goes ashen. He does not want to tell him his future. He is scared to death to tell him anything. Well, Arthur Saville asks him, hey, when everyone leaves, I need to know, because everybody else got a funny thing, like everyone else was fine. Why don't you want to tell me? And the guy won't tell him. He bribes him to tell him. It's like, I must know. I cannot go home having had this interaction with you. And he tells him that he is going to murder someone. And of course, that sets off everything in motion. And it's all about what he does with this knowledge that this palmistry person has told him about his future according to the lines in his hand. It's definitely different from the Canterville Ghost. Easy to read, reads very quickly. It's not very long. The last one was more of just a quick short story. It was called The Sphinx Without a Secret, an etching, and it is a very short story. It's only about 10 pages long. It's all about this guy who's really fascinated with the machinations of this one woman's life. He thinks that she's having an affair, and he follows her around places, and it's all about what is she doing that she needs to have a private flat someplace else, and is she having an affair or not? It's 10 pages, worth a read. It's definitely an interesting way of writing a short story, just kind of like a character sketch. Next, during this time, there was the Blackout the bestseller list hashtag that was trending, and as I am always down to buy more books, I scoured BookTube to figure out what in the world people would recommend. And one of the topics that came up in my feed was Afrofuturism, which I didn't know was a thing, and now I am obsessed with, and I've bought so many books for. So during that week, I went to my local independent bookstore to buy a whole bunch of Afrofuturism books, written, of course, by Black authors. And the first one I picked up, and I figured this would be great for a quick read, was Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This book is just a short novella, and it is a ride. This is another book I could not put down. This book follows the character of Binti, who is a Himba girl who has been accepted to Uzma University, which is a very long way away in our galaxy. The Himba people are a real people who live in Namibia and parts of Angola, and they are known for having something called otjais, which is, as pictured on the front cover, a reddish orange mud oil fat combination, like a mixture that is used to decorate not only their skin but also their hair. And the way that people have their hair decorated or braided is dependent upon their marital status, their age, what tribe they come from, what family they're part of, and it all tells a story. And Binti is no different. She has her hair braided in a very specific pattern that tells the history of her people and her family. And they don't leave their land. She would be the first person who is Himba to be accepted to the university, and she'd be the first person to ever leave. Her family prefers her to stay home because she has amazing gifts with math. In this universe, mathematics is an alive power that people can harness, and she is very talented in this respect. Her father runs an astrolabe business, and these astrolabes are used to communicate with others and kind of access the world and all the world's knowledge, kind of like our smartphones today. She is going against her family's wishes and decides that she's going to go to the university, and she has to leave in the middle of the night and take a trip on a ship that will take her to the university. What I love about this world building is that the author does not take any time to explain to you what's going on in the world. She does not take long expository paragraphs to describe any of the technology. She does not go into what's happened socially. She absolutely just drops you into this world, has Binti narrate the story as she would to anyone else who lived in the world that she lived in, and you just run with it. Things that are dropped in here is that the ship is alive, that the ship that takes her from Earth to the Uzma University is a creature that they get to use interior spaces of to survive and live on these intergalactic journeys. Best part is there's 2 more books. I immediately ordered them from my local bookstore and now have them in my hands, and I'm picking them up next. This is incredible. Could not put it down. Please read this book. If you've never heard of the Himba people, I highly recommend that you do a quick Google search. It'll help you to understand better Binti's character and what she is doing as a self and culture preservation. This really is important for the story. I did not know about the Himba people before reading this book. Now that I've done research on my own, I feel like I better understand Binti. So please do yourself a favor and just do some quick Google searches on the Himba people, Himba. And then pick up this book, and then immediately pick up the next 2 books, because you're not going to want to put this one down. The next book I picked up was for my monthly book club of reading classics, and it was Love in the Time of Cholera. I know, very apropos, by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I was super excited to pick up this book because our book club had already picked up 100 Years of Solitude, and I loved it. Before I picked up that book, I had never heard of magical realism before, but I am in love with magical realism now, and I could not wait to get started on this book. I did not like it, which was really heartbreaking. I'm really excited that I read 100 Years of Solitude first, because had I read this book first, I might not have wanted to pick up anything else by him, which is really sad. And I wish it wasn't true, but here we are. In this book, you follow 3 people who have weird connections to each other in love and in life. And it's all about their connections they make kind of at old age, although most of the book is told kind of in flashback, telling you the history of their lives together. I want to make sure I get their names right. So we have Fermina Daza, who is the female lead character, and she is married to Dr. Juvenal Urbino, who in the very beginning of the book just flat out dies. This is not really a spoiler. This is just the first chapter. He dies. And immediately her suitor from a previous lifetime, when she was a youngster, before she met the doctor, Florentino Ariza, shows up and declares his undying love for her at her husband's funeral reception. Not the best move. Not the best move. The rest of the book is a flashback as to how she met both of the men, her relationships with both of them, including how her family handles her relationships with both of them, and what she does as she is now a woman in her 60s who has now found herself a widow and has another suitor who may or may not be someone she wants to be involved with. The writing was not terrible. It was not as magical and engaging as 100 Years of Solitude, but it was definitely intriguing. Most of the book, though, you don't really like any of the characters, and it's very rare for my book club to all be in agreement about any book. That's kind of the fun part of book clubs, is you get to hear different ideas. All of us were like, what was this? Why did we bother? What was this even about? The title, by the way, if you're thinking, oh no, you read another plague book, what were you thinking? Okay, technically it happens in the time where cholera was a thing. It's really not a story point, except that the doctor occasionally dealt with a person with cholera. Like, it could have been the time of literally anything. It doesn't matter. That's not pointless. So if you're like, I don't want to read a plague book, it's not a plague book. It's just a weird title. You don't like any of the characters. At least nobody in my group liked them. I couldn't get into them. You don't really think any of them have made good choices. Every now and then you'll kind of think, oh, maybe they are a good person. No, they're not a good person. It's not great. And by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, wow. So I read that, and it's not even like I want to spoil it. There's nothing to really spoil. You just kind of see how their relationship is, and then do they get together in the end? That's the whole story. But at least it was long. And yeah. So please read, not this book, but please read 100 Years of Solitude, because that book was incredible and I loved every moment of it. I wanted that book to last for forever because the writing was so magical. This writing is not bad. It's just the story is not as compelling. So keep that in mind. Okay, the last book that I read during this time, and I took a long time to read, was a book for my professional life, and also apropos for what's happening with Black Lives Matter, which, by the way, Black Lives still matter, was Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. And this is a compilation of essays that are previously published in other locations by the writer Bell Hooks, who is a Black feminist writer and professor who often is speaking about how race and feminism are interlinked, and she writes about education as a whole. Most of this book really talks about higher levels of education, like college and university levels, but this is still an applicable mindset for people who are even teaching preschool, because understanding how race and feminism collide and how education is really an indoctrination point for society means that we have the power, even in the lower primary grades, to influence how people think about each other and the world around them. And if you better understand it from an adult perspective, it's a lot easier to help guide students into ways that are not perpetuating racist ideas or stereotypes or harmful thinking or microaggressions. So this one I took a long time to read. I do not usually like writing in my books. I'm kind of a, please leave it pristine. However, I did not see this as a book that was a reading book. This was a learning book. So I not only did some annotations, but I also did some flags. And yes, the colors for once actually mean something. So I even have my key in here. If anyone's really interested in me doing a video on any of the professional books that I do, I kind of feel like you hearing about a professional read is maybe not the best use of BookTube, but if there actually is interest in me going over like the really important parts and doing like a video just on Teaching to Transgress, I'd be happy to do it. I just want to know if people are interested. So please just drop me a note below, say yes, Bell Hooks. By the way, Bell Hooks is not capitalized for those of you who want to type that in. I'd be happy to. I highly recommend it, especially if you are in education as an educator or an administrator, because this really ties into how we educate at all, and how our system might be completely broken from go, and how to rebuild a classroom. And that's it. I am officially caught up on BookTube with everything that I have read in 2020 up until June 30th. So in my next video, I'm going to talk to you about what I'm currently reading, what my goals are for the rest of 2020. Thank you to everybody who's commented and everybody who's watched and everybody who's subscribed. I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe, so please feel free to do that. I will see you at the next video. And again, thank you for watching. Have a lovely day, everybody.